Welcome to Family Business Diaries, the podcast where we unravel secrets of family businesses. I'm your host, Mary Asante Asamoah, and today we have a remarkable family business leader who's managing the legacy his father built. A titan in healthcare delivery in Ghana, Dr. Elikem Tamaklo. Let me tell you more about him. So Dr. Tamaklo is the managing director of Nyaho Healthcare Limited. He has a diploma in tropical medicine and hygiene from the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, and he holds a master's certificate in healthcare leadership from Cornell University in the USA. Quite a loaded profile. Welcome to Family Business Diaries.
Thank you.
All right, so I want to dive right in, okay? Can you tell us more about yourself?
Well, thank you for the invitation. For me, it's always a question of where to start from. I mean, I grew up in Accra, Ghana. I was born in 1984, and so I'm a young entrepreneur.
You're not young.
Okay. I'd like to think of myself as young. I still claim that.
Yes.
But I grew up in Ghana, and I was actually trained. I wanted to do architecture. I wanted to do design. But growing up in a family business, which was healthcare, everyone was telling me from a young age that you're going to grow up to become a doctor like your dad. I'm telling you, it was a pressure because it almost felt like you didn't have a choice. And for me, I felt like I had a life to live. I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do. And throughout my journey, I always tried to find a way of carving out my own identity. So whereas my dad went in Fansipim, I applied to GIS. I did the exam 3 times to just get in. But Ghana International School GIS, I went in Form 3. That was one way of kind of getting my own identity. I mean, I tried to do my own thing. Even when I got into medical school. So like my father died when I was 15. And at that time, I'd already been trying to figure out, did I want to do medicine? Which there was a part of me that loved medicine. I wanted to save lives. I wanted to have an impact. But there was another part of me that liked design and liked architecture. But the subjects you couldn't really pick. And with him dying, the pressure and almost it just seemed like a natural path to pick medicine. And so the self-selection started then. But I think that, even applying to medical school, he went to Ireland in Trinity College. And this was before Ghana had medical school. So he was one of the few Ghanaians who had to go to Ireland. But when I got accepted to medical school, I got accepted in Ghana. But all my friends, everyone was like, oh, look at you, you got in because of your dad. And for me, I had to really work. I was not a very, I was bottom of my class up to primary school. So it was really a lot of hard work for me to do well. I realized that when you put in the work, when you figure out how you learn, you get a way of getting there. And so I ended up doing well, but it was through a lot of work and hard work and effort. So getting into schools, I didn't want it to be attributed to some sort of factor of my dad. And so I actually chose the school in the UK called St. George's. So it was completely, no one would know who I was. It was not my father's influence. It was really because of my hard work. And I think that really helped me in the beginning because carving out my identity was important for me to establish before coming back into the family business.
It's always important, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
having your self-awareness, knowing what you're about, knowing what you want for yourself without fault. I can imagine the pressure, though. I mean, a boy, your father's a doctor, they'd be like, you're next in line,
Well, I mean, the good thing, my father did not put the pressure on me. And so he actually was very wise in how he dealt with us, in the sense, figure out what you want to do, be good at it. But I think the pressure came from everyone else, and
external
also
forces.
Yeah, it's and it is unintended, but people naturally see, oh, your father's done something amazing, so naturally you should want to continue it. And I think that at a young age, it's very difficult for people who grow up, especially with their parents doing amazing things. It's how to form an identity that helps them realize that they can live their own legacy and it does not necessarily need to come on the back of their parents. It is great when they can stand on their backs to reach to higher heights, but it's not everyone's story.
And I think from what you're saying, eventually when you were left to figure things out for yourself, you did identify that there was a passion for something related to healthcare somehow, right? You wanted to save lives, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, I think that passion to save lives and that passion to see impact, came from watching my dad, watching my mother. I mean, it came from being exposed to healthcare. But at the same time, I wanted to be a war journalist. I mean, I had so many things I wanted to do. I just saw a lot of need, and the question was, how was I going to tackle that? How was I going to be part of the solution? And healthcare was a pathway getting there. Being in medical school, very quickly realized that healthcare is such a broad spectrum, and you can become a researcher, you can become a teacher, you can become a clinician, you can become an entrepreneur. Healthcare is one of those that give you a wide scope. So very early on, I found it difficult to put myself in a niche, which was where my journey continues in the UK. I call the UK my journey, like moving out of my father's home, but almost like Abraham, very unknown circumstances. You have to figure it out. But in figuring out, you learn about yourself, you learn about the environment, such that by the time I came back to Ghana, I think that it wasn't so much figuring out what I was good at. I had discovered that. It was now figuring out an external business, an external environment, and how do I come into that environment and impact that environment. So that was my journey.
Let's take it from here. I mean, Abraham has gone out. You've gone out and
Yes.
discovered all these things.
Yeah.
I mean, being in the diaspora and then moving back home, there's so many factors to consider, right? Because comfort outside, I mean, yes, you want to make a difference, but there are structures, there are certain things that you get there, perks that you probably don't have here. What were the factors? What were the things that led you to make that big decision to move back?
Sure. So I had been working as a doctor, doctor's salary. I'd also been doing a lot of charity work, doing things which were making an impact where I was at. And I was never planning to come back to Ghana because I saw that, I wanted to do something that would kind of be more impactful. I thought Ghana is actually better. Ghana is better than other African countries. And so I did a diploma in tropical medicine and hygiene because I wanted to work with in Liverpool. I wanted to work with Médecins Sans Frontières, that's Doctors Without Borders, again, working in war-torn areas. So I went on a medical mission to the DRC. And
That's bold.
yeah, I mean, we had to land in Uganda and go across the border because of the internally displaced communities, obviously the warfare, the militants, and I saw poverty like I'd never seen. There was a city, or it was a town, 500,000 people called Butembo. That's like a village. I mean, it's a village of 500,000. So there's no brick building apart from the mayor's office and the Catholic nunnery. And there's no streets, no plumbing. And the poverty was so bad. I'd never seen anything like it. And the question is, how do you solve a problem like that? Because you saw UN agencies, you saw the vehicles, and you kind of realized that even their aid is not a solution. So I was reading Dambisa Moyo's book, Dead Aid, which was all about the fact that aid is not a solution for Africa. It's about teaching people how to fish. And so, I realized that, okay, I can become a cog in a wheel in someone else's NGO, or in Ghana, my father and now my mother, who then took after him, have built an organization that's making an impact. I can come in, build on that, and be able to make an impact, get credibility, get influence, and start to use that influence to then impact on a national or policy level scale. That was my long-term strategy.
Your strategy was on point.
Yeah, it was not really about coming. I thought, anyone can run a business. And because I was so mission-led, coming to Ghana was a big thing because I just did not want to, for me, I did not want to take the easy route. So you could say that in the UK, The easy route is just to put in your years, you'll get promoted, become a consultant, you'll just get your
It's all
nice
set for you,
house.
yeah.
And then, in a sense, if I just came back to just continue what my mother was doing, what my father was doing, and not build on it, if I was just coming to continue it, then that was also like, you can get your house, you can get your car, and you're sorted. Growing a business, employing people, knowing that those people will take care of their family members, and then their family members, their extended family. Doing that at a big scale was where then I was like, okay, if I'm coming back, I can't just come back and do the same thing. It's got to be something. And so that's why I came back, because I think it was this sense of restlessness within myself to see something shift because of what I could do. But of course, if you're coming from family business, you are privileged. So if you've got privilege, what do you do with it? Compared to someone else who's got nothing but is able to figure out the path, the onus is then to figure it out. So I also did not come in thinking I know it all. I came in with some humility because I was like, yeah, there are people who know how to do this better than I do. So I need to listen to them.
I love that you allowed the passion to bring you here, but was it as simple? Because
Yeah,
you have siblings, right? You have other family members in the
I
business?
do. My sister, so I've got two sisters. One lives in Australia. She's a lot older, has children, has an established career, has done really
Healthcare?
well. No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
She worked for a national NGO. She was the CEO of that NGO. Is a consultant. She has her own business, and her children are also working. So her children are also around similar ages as I am. So doing hotel and law. So
Very different
very different.
Okay.
Whilst my younger sister was actually in the company, my younger sister had studied in America, and she came back. She was working with my mother. She established some of the departments, the business development unit in the organization. And so by the time I was coming back, she was in the company, and it was now figuring out, okay, what was going to be our relationship, our working relationship. Coming back was not also easy in that I'd found my wife in the UK. She was non-Ghanaian, so it was going to be a question of how would she adjust. And so the time when we came to Ghana, it was very much exploratory. The first time was 2012, and it was December, and I kind of looked at how she managed. And my wife is in healthcare, so she's an HIV specialist nurse. So she had, a desire to work, and that was one thing. Having a partner who could see what I was trying to do, who could support you. I can imagine that if she had not shown an interest, that would have been extremely difficult.
Would you
But
still have done it?
I think I would have, but I think it would have caused a lot more strain on the marriage. And I think that's where, and it's a fresh one. We'd just been married for about, by 2015, we were about 2 years in our marriage. So, I think that having alignment with your partner, and especially for people who are training outside or studying outside, invariably you're going to meet people outside. If you can't help it, and you might not meet someone who's Ghanaian. And even if you meet someone who's Ghanaian, if that person has a career in the US or in the UK, like you're asking them to leave a career and follow you. It's a lot to ask. So it was not easy, but I think that it was made easier by having a partner who supported me. And in 2015, when we actually came, within a month, we found out we were pregnant. She was pregnant with our first child.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But that first child, everyone, at the time I wrote an article on LinkedIn that Ghanaians don't trust the healthcare system, because I came to meet, a situation whereby healthcare in Ghana is, there's broken trust in that everyone has experienced bad healthcare, or they've experienced, things which should not have happened, either to themselves or their family members. And we see it all the time. And I had come into the organization, which had been in existence for, at the time, 45 years. So, they'd had many interactions with many people. Like we see thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people a year. So you can imagine a number of interactions, more chances of things going wrong as well, but even more things going right. You don't hear the things that go right, you hear the things that go wrong, but those are people. And so when my wife was pregnant and she was going to give, we were talking about where would she deliver, everyone was like, oh, she's going to go to the UK. That's where she's from, that's where her parents are. But my wife and I talked, and she made a decision that, no, if I'm running a healthcare company, how can she go somewhere else and deliver? She has to deliver in Ghana. I mean, she's amazing because we didn't have a neonatal ICU. So we knew that there was risk when it comes to if something was to go wrong. You know, in the UK, you have all your subspecialties, all your subspecialties. And, you know, Ghana, you have general specialists, but when you're looking for subspecialties, so that's people who are just like, if you think about orthopedics, you know, that's bones, but you can find someone who's just specialized in a shoulder. You can't do that in Ghana because you don't have enough people who can afford that shoulder surgery in the first place for you to say you're only going to do shoulders. And so we knew that, okay, most people give birth, we should be fine. And, you know, like Sod's Law, it was an emergency. You know, everything was progressing and then it wasn't. It was really like I was a husband. I was not, you know, that's what makes us all equal. You know, it doesn't matter your role, your title. I was a husband of my wife who was in labor, we needed an emergency cesarean because my daughter was actually in distress. And when my daughter was born, and this is why I love the people who we work with in Nyaho, because they really went above and beyond. The medical director, who's a pediatrician, stayed overnight, 3 a.m. to give antibiotics. And for Nyaho, we are able to attract specialists from across the country. There was only one pediatric cardiologist. My daughter needed to have, like, there was a question about whether her heart was fine. It was really bad, and there was only one in the country, and we were able to get that person to come and have a look at her and kind of look at that. So that's kind of the challenge of the first year. The first year we were also robbed in our house. Someone came into the house, and so these things happen where it's like
You start questioning.
you start questioning, okay, did I sign up for this? Because you didn't know what you were signing up for. Also, you become, as the CEO, you become the ambassador for the organization. So even when things go wrong that are completely unrelated, then you are the one who has to deal with the situation. So I think that first year was really a wake-up call to say, okay, if we're going to do this, the onus is to really make sure that we do this well. We're not 50-50. We cannot say that we're going to put 1 foot here and 1 foot in the UK. It's got to be all hands on deck. And that's why I think that having an alignment with your family, because my mother, who, you know, has a wealth of information, she was there. My younger sister was there, and so all of us were very committed. The family were committed to ensuring that the hospital, the healthcare business, would do well.
And I remember, I think I've heard you say somewhere that when it comes to your business, so there's family business, but you call yours is it business family? Is that what you say?
So it's the evolution, you know, and I think that is the journey we have gone through as a family, because it's one thing when the founder is alive. That is your generation one, or your generation one, entrepreneur. He's a visionary. He's the one who knows what needs to be done. And then you get to generation two, which is your sibling partnership. It's siblings who need to figure out how to work together. And generation two is difficult because that brings a bit of dynamic. So even though I'm the CEO, I'm under the board, and that's where the board report to the shareholders. And the shareholders have different shareholding structures. So everyone is equal. Everyone's got their own different shareholding. So it's no longer about what you think. It's about what does the family think. So we realized that if the organization was going to do well, we would need to get investment. My father had tried to grow the organization. And especially if you're looking for investors, we were asking ourselves, what would be the biggest turnoff or the biggest thing that would scare an investor away if there is conflict in the family, if the governance is not right? No one would want to kind of partner with you. And so we went through workshops in 2016 to 2017 to help figure out topics that, we had not discussed. We had not discussed what's our shared vision for the company. My father had his vision, but what is the next generation? What is the shared vision? And that was really tense because you have people who have their own ideas, you have to negotiate. But then this thing of family business, where the family are in the business, we had to shift our mindset to say, no, we are a business family. The family are investors. The family are investing in the business. So if you shift that all the family are in the business, that means that everyone wants their own different things. But when you shift it to being that we are a business family, that we as a family are investors, so thinking like investors, what do we want to do?
Major shift in mindset. It makes a big difference.
It makes a huge difference because then you start to realize, okay, governance is a best practice. It's not just good because you tick a box. It's good because it creates the best chance of the business to thrive. When you bring in people who are competent, when you bring people who are independent, when you bring people who can work together. So having a board as well is not enough. It's got to be a board that can work well together.
Yeah, it's not just, not just a group of friends.
No, I mean, my father had his board who, even though he had groups of friends, because he was a founder and he was entrepreneurial, like they were advisors. And there's something to say at the startup level, you don't need a full board. Having an advisory board, having people to sound off. But at a certain point when you have so many different shareholders who are family members, for the business has got to be focused, has got to execute. And that kind of execution does not come from, it needs strong governance to be able to get to the level you need it to get to. And if you think about it, every generation, there are more mouths to feed, right? So if you're an investor and you put your money in treasury bills, now, Ghana's gone through a very rough time. So I'm just trying to say that any investor putting their money in something would want to see a return. So even if you are doing it for the social good, even if you're doing it for the community, you still need it to be profitable, for it to be sustainable. It's got to live beyond you. So the returns that you get has got to be better. If you look at your money, if you're going to put your money passively, do nothing with your money, leave it somewhere, what is that return versus if you put it somewhere where you've actually got commitment? So that challenges the business family to start thinking of, okay, just because we want to do something, just because we are passionate about it, should we do it? And that's been a journey for us. So right now, these are the challenging conversations that we have. And we've got to have different conversations than what the board has. Because the board will look at it from the perspective of the company. But as a business family, we've got to look at it at the perspective of not just this business. Are there other businesses that we should be going into? How do we think long term when the next generation come in? If there's only one business which is only doing so much, more mouths to feed in the sense that everyone is trying to get something. Everyone wants a job. That's why businesses don't do well beyond a certain level if they don't grow and if they don't do some sort of formalization.
When you talk about should we just focus on healthcare, should we do other things and all of it, I worry about that. That is it important? When you think family business, one school of thought is focus and do what you're doing well. Mm-hmm. And then you find other businesses that are into maybe hotels, and yet there's another group that, what do you think about that? Have you thought, because for Nyaho, you've really expanded, you've done a lot, but it's still within the healthcare space, right?
Yes.
What would you say to that? That is it good to almost have all your eggs in one basket, or as a family business, it's important to at least diversify and do different things, maybe taking into consideration the different interests of family members, right? What do you think about that?
So I think it's a great question because, first of all, a few principles. Every family is different. every family makeup will be different, and that makes it all very unique to each family what you do. I think the second thing is that, like, yeah, when COVID came, a lot of businesses went bankrupt, a lot of businesses collapsed. And so it's not just the owners who are affected, it's also the staff, the people who work and their families. There's so many people who are dependent on businesses. And, Ghana's economy is really driven by business. You don't get taxes if you don't have businesses that are paying taxes, and they're paying wages so that people can pay taxes. So everything comes from business. So, I think that I look at it from a there is what I desire versus the reality of where we are. As much as I desire to have a diversified risk portfolio, meaning that I would love to have businesses which are in different industries. Some of them are risk taking, some of them are minimal risk, some of them are in different complementary industries. I mean, that's not realistic for where I'm at. So maybe that means that when I'm investing my money, if I have my money, I might need to think of, okay, any little bit I'm saving, how do I save? And that's why it's important for us that every family member has their own diversification strategy. Every family member cannot be solely, this is long term, everyone cannot be going to one source for everything. And that makes it important. It's not the case right now. I'm not saying that my family members are all dependent on the organization. In fact, they are not. I'm just highlighting that if you were thinking about it from a principle, it would be to diversify your income streams. So that's my personal view that, in the beginning, you might start from a place of strength, but every business should be involved in R&D, research and development. Every business should have an innovation pipeline because the work of the health, the industries that you're in will change. And what was true yesterday might not be true tomorrow. So there's a McKinsey model, the 3 horizons model, that talk about the different curves, that is natural maturity curve of a business. In the beginning, the great idea is doing well, huge market, capturing your market, huge volumes. But if you do not innovate, then that's just going to start to die down. And if you're a mature business, and we are 53 years, so definitely if you don't reiterate yourself frequently, you'll be disrupted. Someone will come with a better idea, a better product, and they'll come in. So it's not really about what you want. It's not about what you desire. It's also, you can put in the best innovation plans, and then you have a year like 2022, where in 1 year, the economy goes through such a big black swan event, unplanned. It could wipe away all your savings, all your plans. So you have to manage, and you have to realize that life changes, but it doesn't mean that you don't have a vision. It doesn't mean that you don't work towards it. So for a lot of people, maybe the focus is focus on your place of strength, but also understand that if you don't keep on innovating and trying to diversify, you might be caught out.
I mean, you speak about innovation. I've been to Nyaho. I see the growth, the expansion. I mean, you started off airport, and now you're like the Octagon, and I like the one by the Association School.
Our primary care.
Yes.
We have
So you've been doing
locations.
so much. Yes. I guess this is part of the innovation because you probably started off with not having certain things and you've grown to
Yes.
this level. How have you managed that innovation? Because maybe part of it, I don't know if it's coming from you as the leader and what you envision versus maybe the traditional, what you had in place, what your father wanted. Like, how have you managed the family or the business in terms of innovation? And
It's a good question again, because I would say every year it changes. When I first came in 2015, I think I had clarity. I had come in the year before and I'd done a number of surveys, and I spoke to our staff, I spoke to our people, and asked the question, what should we be doing? I spoke to a lot of the specialists, I spoke to people just to get a sense, I spoke to our patients. And so it was quite clear that we needed to do a few critical things, because we either had to change the organizational structure, or we would actually not be able to deliver on the value.
okay.
So 2015, I quickly made some quick wins by expanding our consulting rooms, creating a better waiting room experience.
We are
We had
grateful for that.
I know it used to be outdoors. I mean, the infrastructure was designed for a tropical country, but that was before we had air conditions. And so, the rooms were big and large, and the waiting rooms were smaller, and now we had a lot more people. So some of these constraints we were able to manage for it. We brought in technology in 2015. My mother had actually started the sourcing for the companies, and then I had to really focus on the execution. And we moved all our manual paper records to digital records. That was a pivotal change, inflection point, because it meant that we could now we had to bring in fiber optic broadband before there was fiber optic broadband in airport. It was huge investments, but there was a change in the strategy, because the strategy had always been to try and build a hospital of international standards in the one site and make it bigger, bigger, bigger. But in coming and getting all the data, that did not point to that conclusion. The conclusion was we needed to really focus on certain areas first. So the strategy at that time was to open up primary care centers, because people who used to come to Nyaho had gone and were living somewhere else. And traffic is so much that why would I come all this way? So the surveys showed that people would go to the closest clinic. If they had an emergency, they'd go to the closest thing next to them, and then they would come to Nyaho as a second line for specialist information. So it made sense to move closer to where our patients were. And that's why you see that us on different locations. That was a shift. But now I'd say that the board and the shareholders, every year we look at the strategy again. We have a board retreat, and we really ask ourselves, what has shifted? Has anything changed? Do we need to drop something? And so right now it's a collaborative effort of defining our strategy.
So then with this, would you say your experience working outside or being outside, did these things influence some of, because getting, when you talk about doing surveys or reading or doing all these workshops and stuff, is it a mindset from working outside, or what would you?
I actually don't think it's from working outside. I think I was lucky and blessed to have people around me who knew better, who could advise me. And I'd also seen other entrepreneurs, and I'd learned that what was key for me was to surround myself with people who were smarter than I was. So having a coach and mentors. So before I came to Ghana, I actually had a coach who was in Liverpool, had built his business, sold his business, and he was. I used to I used to go and do some work in his offices, and he kind of said to me, "What's my strategy coming back?" And I was like, "What do you mean?"
Ask you the tough questions.
And I was like, "Yeah, ask me the tough questions," because here I am coming. I've been working for a long time in the UK. Ghana has its own healthcare network. There are doctors who are older than I am, and healthcare is hierarchical. So, how do I establish my authority? So we had to come up with a strategy that said, in me coming to take over from my mom was there first month. She was in charge. I was observing. I was sitting into the meetings. I was learning. Second month, she handed over to me. I was in charge, but she was around. So that she could be in the meetings to help me with my context. And then the third month, she then traveled to give that ability for me to cement my authority. Because, when you have a strong leader and they've handed over, people will bypass you and go to that person. And that person will call you and say, hey, this person's come to me. And how do you tackle that? So I give my mom the ability for a leader to step back and allow someone else to cement the authority. It's a maturity. And so by her taking that time away, and even when she came back, whenever people would go to her, because change is not easy.
It's
and
not,
lots of people
especially
were
on the side.
upset. Exactly. So a lot of people would come and call her, and she would say,
The
I'm
small
no
boy.
longer yeah, and I was 30 when I came into the role. So people would be like, who's this young CEO? But the thing is, she would always say, I'm not in the role. I can give you his number. I can connect you to him. please speak to him. And I think that was really helpful because that first year I cemented my credibility, my authority. Credibility took a few years because people had to see, am I just talking or can I execute? And I think that execution was live the values that you want other people to display. So come to work on time, I would come early. I would work late. I mean, it was really, it was also tough because we didn't have all the roles that we needed. Yeah, we still needed to get things done. So I had to leverage relationships to kind of help give me advice for something. This was before I had an executive team. And I remember those days, it was baptism by fire. It was tough to have enough time. And that's why I'm big on mental health, because the first panic attack I had was in 2017 because it just got too much. And my mother-in-law used to say, you know, you have you're holding water, you're holding a load. In the beginning, you can hold it. But if you keep on holding it, after a while, it doesn't matter how heavy it is, you will start to collapse. And I think that even though I was trying to get things done, I'm only a human being, I'm only one person. So in hindsight, there were lots of lessons learned, but coaches really helped me. And I have a coach now I don't limit myself to one person. I have a coach who helps me with business thinking. I have a coach who helps me with relationships, executive relationship building, how to manage conflict. I have my pastor who helps me with just my spirituality and how can I be ethical? How can I be someone who is consistent with my spiritual self in a workplace whereby you're tempted always to find a shortcut because you have challenges like people wanting bribes and people wanting you to say, look, if you don't do this, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go on social media and share. It's tough. So you need to have that spiritual guide. And then, of course, marriage. My wife and I, we are in this together. So when there's a strain on me, there's a strain on her. So we also need people who could speak into our marriage.
How are you able to manage, this thing where family roles, and then the business responsibilities, like how do you manage that? When is she mommy and when is she maybe a board? Like how do you handle those?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's always a work in progress, It was difficult in coming in, because even though my father was the founder, I think his legacy was a very clear vision. I think that if there's anything I can say to entrepreneurs is the clarity of your vision actually is the investment because my mother was clear about what he wanted. My siblings and I are clear what my father was going for. There's no ambiguity. So it kind of makes the alignment, it's not saying that it's easier, but it makes everyone know at least where the plumb line is. And so, when it comes to my relationship with the family, then, we grew up, conversation about the work was always over dinner. It was always, and it was blurry roles, when are you mother and when are you son? In the boardroom, you see dynamics play out, which are, not what you expect from a board director. It's really what you're seeing as siblings or seeing a mother and son. And those are not helpful for, the conversation that's at hand. So I would say that we've all matured, we've all learned, and over time, our communication has improved. And communication improves, we've gone through the conflict, we've had conflict resolution. And so it's come from a place of pain and sometimes a place of, not speaking to your sibling because you're frustrated, you're angry, but, you've got to have dialogue. And sometimes you need an intermediary, someone who's not a family member who can come in and help. So I think that we've really come a long way because right now, I remember like when last year with the economic crisis, we'd gone through our organization that was very pivotal in the COVID crisis, the COVID management. We had a number of things. We were in the hot zone. We picked the first case of COVID in the country in that March 12th. So we didn't really have a choice. We had to engage. You had to engage. And so our people went through a very traumatic experience because even though the country did not experience lots of deaths, our people did see the deaths. Our people did see that trauma. And having to kind of take a group of people, your employees, your board, through that, and then just as you're beginning to recover in 2022, you now have another economic crisis, and then this is where people are stressed again about their livelihoods. So I remember, it was a lot for me, and I went to my mom, and we were talking, and it was about the business, and it was like, okay, mom, I need my mother right now. I need someone who can listen to me and not judge me, not tell me what I'm doing wrong or what I need to do more of. I need my mother who can, as if I was working somewhere else, just hear me talk about the business and say, oh, that must be tough. And because I could communicate that and kind of set the expectation, she was able to do that. And I think that that's how far we've come. Because in the past, I wouldn't have been so eloquent. I would have been frustrated and out of, probably my voice would have gone a few decibels higher.
And then that's something
else. It would have been a conflict situation.
Yeah.
But I think that's where maturity comes from. So I do think that it's about perseverance. Every family has got its dynamic. It might not be the same types of issues that you get frustrated over. You don't get frustrated over that. Maybe you become quiet. Maybe no one talks about issues. Everyone just keeps quiet. So, these are the dynamics that make family business complex, that what is working for me is not necessarily going to work for you. It might be actually the wrong advice for you.
So let me ask this very interesting one. Would you want your kids to follow in your footsteps? Would you advise your kids to come work for the family business?
I'm very clear that my answer now is no. Not in this way. And actually, we do have a family policy that says that, I'll be the last family member to just, the way I came into the company, what we want is a professional, not saying that it wasn't, but what we want to do is to ensure that the system is so robust that we want to encourage all family members to work outside, establish their careers, establish their professional qualifications, and then when they apply, make sure that they're the best candidate for the role. That's the current roles that we have. However, as I talked about, we want to become a business family. So right now we don't have the right structure, but in the future, I would love for the structure to be that we have investments, and that investment fund or that ability for us to invest and diversify is such that if we have family members who have great ideas, who have great opportunities, we can foster the entrepreneurial spirit and really, buy into the ideas, whether with seed funding or whether with some sort of support. I mean, this is, for me, how I would see my children getting involved. Unless they had a desire, if they wanted to lead a healthcare company, then great, I would make sure they could get the experience of internships, but they would have to go and, work somewhere else, build their track record, and come and apply and show that they're the best person for the role. But so that's currently, it's not to say that as we are now, I would say no, but definitely would want them to be part of the family legacy of being a business family, so that every generation is thinking about, okay, what's the next generation? How are we going to build on top of this? And my philosophy is, I believe business is a force for good. So I am pro business because I believe that if we create jobs, that's really when we change the cycle of poverty. So that is why I would want to invest in my kids doing a business that's successful, because ultimately I think that Africa is evolving and we cannot have an Africa. And I always say Ghana is the black star of Africa. So even when I say Ghana, I'm talking about Africa, but we cannot have an Africa that on the world stage is seen as less than or not able to come to the table, because climate change and the new world order, everyone is looking at Africa, but it's not looking at Africa as an equal partner. And that's why we need to build our own credibility. We need to show that we can solve our problems. So I think that every Ghanaian has an onus to do well. And I want to see in terms of healthcare, I mean, right now we have so many hospitals that need to do well. So I tell my people, I don't see a hospital as a competitor. I see that right now we can't even give the basics to the population. How much more try and say that you can do cancer treatment? I mean, we are so far down that way. So we cannot say we're giving quality healthcare until we can compare ourselves to the US or the UK. If we can see that here, then I think you can say, okay, now we can talk about competition.
I love that you make reference to, the U.S. I know your father had a special hospital. There was a hostel. I had this story
Mayo
from your,
Clinic.
yes.
Yes, yes.
So I love that. I mean, he had a standard and he wanted to go for that.
And I mean, look, let's be real. I mean, as much as we talk about competition, Mayo Clinic was founded by a father who had two sons. I mean, every establishment is a family
There's a
business.
story,
It's a story.
yes.
But his two sons, when he passed over, his two sons brought in the group medical practice, and that's where they had to make it bigger than themselves. They made some decisions. But you're talking about over 150 years. So we cannot, I mean, we have a long way to go. And I always ask the Ghanaian population to understand that healthcare in Ghana has got a long way to go. So we need empowered patients who will give feedback, but not give feedback in a way of destroying a company. Give feedback in a way of saying, if you don't improve this, you are failing. So I'm giving you the feedback to improve, and I'm going to hold you accountable for that improvement. Because we need hospitals, we need doctors. So the accountability has to come, but not to a point of saying, I'm going to drive you out of business. It's got to be in a way of saying, look, I'm giving you feedback. And I'm going to hold you accountable. If you say you're going to do something in a month's time, I'm going to find out, did you do it? And if you don't do it, okay, how are you going to get it done? Because you need to get it done. So I'm going to talk to the regulator.
You want that?
We have got to see a drastic change in a poorly regulated healthcare is poorly regulated or under-regulated. So that means that any Tom, Jack, Jill can do something somewhere, and because patients might not complain, they get away with it. And it's why we don't trust our healthcare system. And people who are trying to get things done well are tainted by what someone has done or what one person has done taints that. So we need to ensure that at least the basic things are done. And that's what we deserve. Every Ghanaian deserves safe care. And so I'm not saying that we are perfect, but I'm telling you that if you give us feedback, we like the feedback because it's a reminder for us that, hey, if you can do 100,000 outpatient visits, but if you say 1% have a problem, 1% of 100,000 is 1,000 people. If you now personalize those people and give them names, that's even 0.1% is a person's life. So it's a tough thing to do, put in systems that can ensure consistency, morning, evening, weekends. I mean, holidays, we don't stop. And that makes it complex. It makes it complex, but we're up for the challenge, and I am up for the challenge. My role is changing, and I think that's where the future will be that we've got to also think differently. So just because I started off doing one thing, I think my value now can be to really shine a light on what people are doing and help in what the business looks like in 5-10 years.
If you could change one thing, I mean, when you joined in 2015, right? If there's one thing you could do differently, what would that be, based on all this experience you had and based on everything you said?
If there was one thing I could do differently, you know what? Even today, I was talking to a manager in our organization. I wouldn't do anything differently because I've learned and I've grown from it. But what I would advise people, especially if I was advising myself, I would have advised myself to prioritize my mental health and wellness more. If you're not healthy, your decision making is impaired, and it's like going to a professional fight, going to Olympics, and you have a handicap. I mean, when you get to work, work is the zone where you've got to be a warrior. You've got to fight. And sometimes, when we when we are frustrated, that's whereby we are not internally, we are worried. Internally, we are concerned. And so we are stressed about how we're going to make this month's payroll. But then the people who are around us are going to be part of that solution. So if we don't manage ourselves, then in the process of trying to do the right thing, we can really damage and you can worsen the situation or make it harder. So I wish, and I try not to say I wish, but I've learned that my ability to manage my stress, my ability to manage how I respond to a stressful situation could give me a better output if I can prioritize that. So that'd be my message.
And if you could give one message to family businesses, founders, next gens, focusing on family, or should we say business? No, most people identify as family businesses for now. What would that one key message be?
I mean, I think you're doing an amazing job with this platform. I mean, this platform is talking about the stories and bringing it to light because there's so many stories that, if we could just hear about what people have gone through, we might not make the same mistake. And so for entrepreneurs and any SME, any startup, it's a family business. Unless you are going to sell it within the next year or two, it's a family business because anything could happen to you and it becomes now a burden or a challenge or an opportunity for your family. So if you're an entrepreneur or a founder, I would say have the difficult conversations with your family whilst you're still alive. Be bold, be strong, be courageous. Have the conversation about what happens if I die.
You don't like that.
We don't like that. But if that situation happened, your family would still need to deal with it. And most people, even some husbands, don't share with their wives what's going on in the business. And yet, when something happens, even if you're not going to die, even if you fall sick and decisions need to be made, there needs to be some sort of contingency plan. If you have a father or a mother who's running a business, I think it's great to get involved, at least just understanding what they're doing and maybe asking more questions than trying to give advice. Asking questions as to why do you think about this in this way? What do you see as the next iteration? What do you foresee as the challenges that would come? How would you manage those challenges if they came? And, almost be a coach to your parents because by asking them those questions, it helps them really reflect and think because they have really done something without you already. I mean, they have some understanding, so of course they would want to do well. But I do think that sometimes we are restless. We want to get things done. We think we know it. And I do, like, my mom would tell me when I came, focus on this. And I'm like, it's okay, Mom, I've got it. Focus on, and then something would happen. I'm like, she said that actually. And then I'd have to go to her and say, okay, when you said that, I mean, what did you mean by that? and I'd tell her, go with my tail behind my my legs. So I do think that asking questions, being humble, and I don't necessarily think that every family member should be in the business, but I think that if you think of the mindset of, how do we transition to think of ourselves like investors, it creates a bit of the passion is there, no one's going to take it from you, but it makes you able to be thinking like an investor. And if you're going to be, even if you're going to be selling a business, it's great to think like how the person, like you're negotiating, see it from where they would be coming from. I think that's really healthy. So the last thing I would advise is please, everyone just continue to learn. We are blessed because in Germany, more than 20 generations of family businesses, in Japan, in the US, they've done so much more that we can actually learn from them, and they're all actually case studies already. So you can also learn from, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, Mercedes-Benz, L'Oreal, Lego. I mean, there's so many that, everyone will do a different thing. So figure out what you want to do as your own family. Don't try and copy someone else.
This has been so good. Thank you so much for, just sharing your experience. I think you actually got personal at some point, so I'm very grateful to you for pouring out so much. I believe everyone's taking a note, at least somebody's definitely in something that's going to affect their business, and I'm truly grateful because that's what this is about. So really grateful. Thank you for honoring our invitation to be on the Family Business Diaries. And, well, I'm hoping next time we invite you, you'll be here, right?
Of course.
Okay. To our audience, thank you very much for joining us on this episode. We release new episodes monthly. You can follow us on all podcast streaming platforms. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on all social media platforms at Family Business Diaries. See you on the next episode. Thank you.